I have a question for you. What is the most unread book on your bookshelf?
Oh, that's a good one.
I don't mean the one you bought last week. I mean the one that just sits there like a signal.
Hmm.
The one that says, I am a serious person who understands strategy. It's probably wedged right between a biography of Steve Jobs and maybe Marcus Aurelius.
I think I know exactly where this is going. You're talking about The Art of War.
I am. Sun Tzu. The book that, every CEO, every football coach, every aggressive middle manager, quotes, but very few, have actually sat down to study.
Yeah.
It has this reputation as the ultimate manual for just crushing your enemies, right?
Yeah.
We imagine it's all swords and shields and burning villages.
Which is the great irony of the text, because if you actually dive into the source material, which is what we're doing today, you realize that Sun Tzu wasn't a warmonger.
Not at all.
He was actually quite terrified of war.
And that's the hook for today's deep dive. We're taking this 2,000-year-old text and just stripping away the Hollywood veneer. We're not looking at this as a manual for violence.
No.
We're looking at it as a master class in efficiency, psychology, and risk management.
It's really a philosophy of conflict resolution. Sun Tzu's core thesis isn't how do I destroy the other guy? It's how do I achieve my political or strategic goal while breaking as few things as possible?
Right. And for everyone listening, whether you're navigating office politics, running a startup, or, I don't know, trying to get your kids to eat vegetables, the principles are identical.
It's about control.
It's about control. But before we get to the cool spy stuff, and we will get to the spies because that section is wild, we have to start where Sun Tzu starts.
The planning.
The planning.
Laying plans. It's the first chapter, and honestly, it's where most modern readers, they kind of check out because it feels like a checklist.
It really does. It lists the 5 constant factors. Sounds a bit like a dry HR memo.
Yeah.
But these factors are the diagnostic tools for whether you're going to win or lose before you even step out the door.
I'd say think of it less as a checklist and more like an equation. Sun Tzu argues that if you can accurately calculate these 5 variables, the outcome of the war is, well, it's mathematically predictable.
So you don't hope to win. You calculate victory.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's run through them, but I want to pressure test them a bit. The first one is moral law.
The translation can be a bit tricky there. It doesn't mean morality in the, ethical sense, like being a good person.
Right.
It means alignment. Does the army have total faith in the ruler? Are they willing to die for the mission?
So in a modern context, are we talking about corporate culture? Buy-in.
It's deeper than just culture. It's a shared reality. I mean, if a CEO says we need to pivot to AI and the engineers just roll their eyes and say, here goes another fad, you have no moral law.
You've already lost.
You've already lost. It doesn't matter how good your strategy is. The execution will fail because the unity just isn't there.
Okay, so that's the internal state. Then he pairs heaven and earth. And this is where I think people get confused. Heaven sounds mystical.
It's not. Heaven is time. It's the seasons, the weather, the cold, and the heat. In a business sense, it's market timing. It's the macroeconomic climate.
Oh, okay.
You can have the best team-great moral law, but if you launch a luxury travel startup during a global pandemic, which is a hostile heaven,
You're going to get crushed.
you're going to get crushed, and Earth is the terrain.
Right. Earth is distance, danger, open ground versus narrow passes.
It's the competitive landscape. Who are the incumbents? What are the barriers to entry?
But see, here is where I want to push back a little. A lot of strategy books say, ignore the competition, just focus on yourself. But Sun Tzu seems to be saying, no, the terrain dictates the strategy.
Absolutely. You cannot ignore the terrain. Sun Tzu would argue that a strategy that works on open ground, say a blue ocean market with no competitors, is basically suicide if you try to use it in a narrow pass, like a highly regulated, saturated market.
The earth determines the tactic.
Exactly.
Then we get the final 2, command and method.
Command is the leader's personal qualities. So wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, strictness. And method is the system.
The logistics, supply chain, organizational chart.
All of it.
It's interesting that he separates the leader from the system.
It's crucial. You can have a visionary leader, great command, but if the method is broken, if the supply lines don't work, the army starves.
And vice versa.
Conversely, you can have a perfect bureaucracy, but if the commander is an idiot, the army just marches right off a cliff.
So the big takeaway from chapter 1 isn't just make a plan, it's run the diagnostic.
Exactly. Before you start a project, you look at these 5. Is the team aligned? Is the timing right? Do we understand the landscape? Is the leadership sound? Are the logistics in place?
And if the answer to any of those is no,
Sun Tzu says, do not fight, you stay home.
which leads perfectly into the next big chunk of the book, which is all about the cost of conflict. Because let's say you run the diagnostic, everything looks green, you decide to go for it. Sun Tzu immediately pivots to becoming an accountant.
A very, very pessimistic accountant. This is the waging war chapter. His famous line here is, there is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare.
That feels so counterintuitive. We tend to think of great conquerors, fighting these long, epic campaigns.
And usually bankrupting their empires in the process. Sun Tzu is obsessed with the burn rate. He lists the cost of glue, of
chariots, of feeding the horses, yeah.
Exactly. He's telling you that every day you are in conflict, you are just bleeding resources.
So inflation, exhaustion, loss of morale.
Right. And even if you win, if the war takes 10 years, you've inherited a ruin. You've destroyed your own economy to crush theirs.
That's not victory.
That's mutual destruction.
And this is why he emphasizes speed. Let your great object be victory, not lengthy campaigns.
Speed is the only way to mitigate the cost. If you must fight, it has to be a lightning strike. You get in, you achieve the objective, you get out. The moment you get bogged down in a forever war.
Whether that's a lawsuit that drags on for years or a price war with a competitor that just drains your margin.
You are violating the core principle of strategy.
But wait, if fighting is so expensive and so risky, wouldn't the ultimate speed be zero?
And now you've arrived at the summit of Sun Tzu's philosophy, the chapter Attack by Stratagem.
The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting.
It's the quote everyone knows, but let's really unpack it. How do you actually defeat someone without fighting them? It's not just by asking nicely.
But it's not pacifism, it's still domination.
It is. It's about attacking their strategy and their alliances before you ever attack their army.
Can you give me a concrete example? Because it sounds great in theory, but what does attacking the strategy even look like?
Think about the console wars, the video game industry. You have Xbox and PlayStation fighting this high-cost war over hardware specs. Who has the faster chip, better graphics? That is direct conflict.
High attrition, blood on the floor.
Total blood on the floor.
Yeah.
Then you look at Nintendo. They looked at that battle, realized they couldn't win on specs, and they attacked the strategy. They shifted the entire battlefield to casual gaming, motion control, portability with the Switch. They didn't fight Sony on Sony's terms. They made Sony's terms irrelevant.
That is winning without fighting.
That is winning without fighting. You make the enemy's strength irrelevant. Or you disrupt their alliances.
Okay.
In a corporate setting, maybe you sign an exclusive deal with the one supplier your competitor desperately needs. You haven't touched the competitor, but you've cut off their legs. They fold because they can't operate.
So you're subduing them without fighting. It's ruthless. It sounds clean when we say without fighting, but it's really about suffocation.
It's extremely ruthless. It's about putting the enemy in a position where surrender is their only rational choice. Sun Tzu says, the skillful leader subdues the enemy's troops without any fighting. He captures their cities without laying siege to them.
But to do that, you have to be incredibly flexible. And this is where the book shifts gears into adaptability.
Yes. The metaphor he uses constantly is water. Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows.
Which implies that having a rigid 5-year plan is basically a death sentence.
Oh, Sun Tzu would hate modern corporate rigid planning. He argues you can have a goal, but the path to the goal must change constantly based on the enemy's movements.
And this is where we have to talk about the 9 situations or 9 grounds. I think this is one of the most practical parts of the book. He categorizes different psychological states based on where you are.
It's pure behavioral psychology. He says that soldiers or employees react differently depending on how safe they feel.
Give us a contrast. What's dispersive ground versus desperate ground?
Dispersive ground is when you're fighting in your own territory. You're close to home. Sun Tzu says, do not fight here.
Why? Wouldn't you want to defend your home turf?
No, because it's too easy to run away. If things get tough, your soldiers know they can just slip back to their families. The psychological commitment just isn't there.
Okay, so that's dispersive ground. Now compare that to desperate ground.
Desperate ground is when you've penetrated deep into hostile territory and there is no way out. There's a river behind you and the enemy in front. On desperate ground, Sun Tzu says, you proclaim to your soldiers that there is no hope of survival.
That sounds like terrible leadership. Hey guys, we're all gonna die.
It's paradoxical, but it works. He says, soldiers, when in desperate straits, lose the sense of fear. If there is no place of refuge, they will stand firm.
You burn the boats.
When you burn the boats, when you remove the safety net, human beings fight with an intensity that is impossible to replicate when they feel safe.
That is the death ground strategy. In a startup, that's the moment you're about to run out of VC money. You have 3 months of runway left. No more pivots. You either sell the product or the company dies.
And that is often when the breakthrough happens. A wise leader knows how to manipulate these situations. Sometimes you deliberately put your team on desperate ground. You cut off the retreat to force that level of focus.
That's high stakes. But to make those kinds of calls, to know when to put your team in danger, when to pull back, you can't just be guessing. You need to know what's actually happening.
Which brings us to the final and, in my opinion, most critical chapter of the book, chapter 13.
The use of spies.
The use of
I
spies.
love that the book ends here. It doesn't end with a parade. It ends with espionage. And Sun Tzu is so specific. He says there's no such thing as just a spy. There are 5 kinds.
The divine skein, he calls it. He says when all 5 are working together, the system is just unreadable to the enemy.
Let's break them down because this is a masterclass in information warfare. First, you have local spies.
These are the inhabitants of the district, the janitor, the disgruntled employee, the people who see the day-to-day. You use them for basic observation.
Then inward spies.
These are officials of the enemy, the VP who is passed over for a promotion, the general who feels disrespected. You turn them. You use their grievance against their master.
And then the converted spy, the double agent.
The most important one. This is the enemy's spy that you've caught, turned, and sent back. And they're so important because they are the channel through which you feed misinformation to the enemy.
Which leads to the darkest category, the doomed spy.
This is where Sun Tzu's ruthlessness really comes out. A doomed spy is your own spy who you deliberately feed false information to.
Okay, how does that work?
You tell them, we are attacking the West Gate tomorrow. They believe it. They get captured by the enemy. They crack under torture and confess. They are attacking the West Gate.
And the enemy believes them because the spy isn't actually lying. They believe it's true.
Exactly. So the enemy moves all their troops to the West Gate. You attack the undefended East Gate. And the spy, well, once the enemy realizes they were fooled, that spy is doomed.
They're executed. He treats this human life purely as a disposable asset to sell a lie.
It's chilling, but it emphasizes his point. Deception is the heart of warfare.
You're finally the surviving spy.
The one who actually comes back with the report.
So why does he spend so much time on this? Why detail these 5 specific types?
Because he wants to hammer home that foreknowledge cannot be gotten from ghosts and spirits. You cannot consult a horoscope. You cannot rely on gut feeling. Strategy must be based on hard data collected from human sources.
He connects right back to the beginning. You can't calculate the 5 constant factors.
Yeah.
You can't know the Earth or the enemy's plans without this spy network.
Correct. If you don't have the data, your calculation is garbage. And if your calculation is garbage, you lose.
This brings us to the ultimate synthesis of the book. The quote that's probably on 1,000 motivational posters, but it means something completely different now. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
But notice the second half, which is usually left off. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat.
That's the 50-50 shot.
And if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle.
The know yourself part is the one I think we struggle with the most. It's easy to hire a consultant to analyze the market, to know the enemy. It is really, really hard to look in the mirror and say, our moral law is broken or our general is incompetent.
It requires a kind of ego death. To know yourself, you have to strip away your own propaganda. You have to admit that maybe your method is messy. Maybe your soldiers are only there for the paycheck.
But if you lie to yourself about your own strengths,
You are handing the enemy a weapon to use against you.
because a smart enemy one who has read Sun Tzu will find that crack. They will use their spies to find your weak point, and they will attack you there using speed.
Exactly. It's a closed loop. The whole book is a single integrated system. You know yourself through assessment. You know the enemy through intelligence. You avoid their strength and strike their weakness with tactics. You do it fast, and you win before they even realize what happened.
When you lay it out like that, it makes modern business strategy look almost clumsy. We tend to brute force things. We throw money at problems. Sun Tzu is saying, use your brain, not your wallet.
And use your psychology.
Right.
Remember, the ultimate target isn't the enemy's body or their bank account. It's their mind. If you can convince them they have already lost, the war is over.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. We live in the age of big data. We're obsessed with analytics, tracking competitors, reading the heaven and earth of the market. We have more skies than ever before.
We are drowning in information about the enemy.
Right. But Sun Tzu's equation has two sides. Knowing the enemy is only half the battle. The other half, knowing yourself, is arguably much harder.
It's certainly more painful.
So the provocative thought for today is this. You probably know what your competitor is doing, but do you truly know what you are doing? Are you ignoring a toxic culture or a broken process because it's uncomfortable to fix? If victory requires knowing yourself and the enemy, which half of that equation are you neglecting?
And are you brave enough to turn that spy network inward on yourself to find out the truth?
That is the question. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the art of war. Go read the book. It's short, it's brutal, and it's brilliant. We'll see you next time.